Hi everyone, this is Norm Robillard, the creator of the Fast Track Diet, and today we're going to make some pickles. So we want to turn these Boston pickling cukes into these lacto fermented dill and garlic pickles. So how do we do that? Well, we need some equipment. We need some mason jars, and I like these because they have markings on the side that tells you the amount of volume, which is going to help us when we add the salt. Okay. And here's the salt. I am using 4.5% pickling salts. Why pickling salts? Because it doesn't have iodine, and that can inhibit the growth of the probiotic bacterial strains that are on the skin of these pickles. Strains like lactobacillus acidophilus, brevis, lactobacillus thermophilus, and many others. So all these healthy probiotic bacteria, good for our small intestine. We want those to be able to grow, but we don't want mold, fungi, other deleterious bacteria from growing, so we need a lot of salt. And you need to use between 3 and 5% salt. Today I'm using 4.5%, so that's 4.5 grams for every 100 mils, or 45 grams per liter. So I've weighed out 45 grams here, and in a moment we're going to add that, and then we're going to add some mineral water. Why mineral water? Because we don't want the chlorine in there that will also inhibit the growth of these probiotic strains. So we'll make that up in a minute. What else do we need? You need a lot of organic pickling cukes. In our case, we have an organic garden, so we just go out and pick those. But you can get these at a farmer's market. And while I'm at it, there's a couple of these pickles here, cucumbers, that still have the little flower on this end. So here's the stem. Here's a little flower, and we need to cut those flowers off because there's an enzyme in there, here's another one, that will inhibit the fermentation. So let's get rid of those. The rest have been done. All of these cucumbers have been rinsed but not washed extensively because the bacterial strains we want are all over the surface of these cucumbers. So there's that. What else do we need? We need tannins in there to keep these cucumbers crisp as they ferment, and a good source of tannins is grape leaves. So our neighbor has a grapevine, so we're able to go and get some nice grape leaves for the tannins. If you don't have a grapevine, another good source of tannins is raspberry leaves, and we happen to have a raspberry bush out in the backyard, so we can use either one of those. We also grow a lot of dill, and then we cut some of that down, and you can put the flowers and the dill, and you can just put a whole bunch in there, right? It's the dill pickles, and also a lot of garlic. We put probably a half a bulb of garlic. Just clean them up, get the skins off, and put about a half a bulb, I don't know, 7 or 8 of these cloves in every bottle of pickles. We also are going to add some pickling herbs and spices. And there's recipes for this online. Maybe I'll post it below the video. I'm going to use about a tablespoon or two of those herbs. So let's take a couple of these steps. Before I begin, let's also mention this. In addition to the salt controlling, to control so that only the good bacterial strains grow, salt is really important. There's one other important control mechanism. This needs to be anaerobic, and you'll notice on this jar of pickles it's done, right? It has this fermentation lock on the top, and that's so, and you can see it's a little cloudy, and that's normal. The lactic acid bacteria growing in there, and they're producing small amounts of gas, carbon dioxide, and that escapes through this fermentation lock. So every time you set one of these up, you need to buy some of these locks, and you fill it to the line with water, so just the carbon dioxide can escape, no oxygen can get back in, because that will allow some of the negative strains to grow. And just, I guess, while I'm at it, how do you make these? You can buy these online for about $1 a piece. You can also buy these mason jar plastic covers with the silicone seal, right? So when you seal them up, and take half of these covers and drill a 5/8 inch hole through them. Put them on a block of wood upside down so you don't crack them. Drill through 5/8 of an inch, and then you take one of these silicone grommets, put that in the hole, and then you just push the fermentation lock through, but not too far. So you want a nice tight seal, but you don't want it to come out too far on the other end, because if it dips down below the brine solution, the brine will get forced up in there and that will just make a mess. So you're going to want some head space, and don't push this down too far. So that's that. Let's actually make this brine solution right now. So we have 45 grams of salt, right? That's going to be 4.5% brine if we fill this up to be a total volume of 1 liter. And you can see the marking on the side. So let's do that. So we have a liter of brine. I have some extra brine over there if I need it, but this will probably be enough once we put the pickles in another mason jar. Just pouring this brine over them, it probably will be enough to fill up the jar. So you want to give it a good mix. You set this aside, and then before we use it, we'll just do a quick check, make sure all the salt is dissolved. Okay, so we talked about the leaves. For actually setting one of these up, when you have all of these things in place, it's actually pretty quick. When you get some fresh pickles on your vines, you can just come in. If you have these other pieces in place, it's pretty quick to set these up. So essentially, before we put the pickles in, let's take a couple of other steps. We're going to use a good tablespoon or more of the pickling spices. Throw those down in the bottom. We're going to use about, as I said, a half a bulb of garlic, so some good large pieces of garlic down the bottom. And then we're also going to use a pretty decent amount of dill, right? The dill pickles, and this will impart a really great flavor on them. Maybe even a little more. Okay, and then you can cover those up with 2 or 3 of these grape leaves or the raspberry leaves. Just kind of poke those down in. And then we're going to layer these pickles in. They've all had the flowers cut off the end, so that enzyme is gone. And just, you can use chopsticks or your hands, but you want to just try to put those in the best you can. If you end up with spaces, you can sometimes use other vegetables to fill in the space, a couple of pieces of onion or other vegetables you want to ferment. Of course, you'll end up with a taste that's a little bit of a mix of all of those vegetables together. But you can see how nicely those go in using chopsticks. But you don't want to put too many long ones in, so that you don't have room for this. This is a glass weight that goes on top, holds all the vegetables under the brine, because if they poke up above the brine, that's one of your control mechanisms. Mold and things can grow on them, and other bacteria. So everything needs to stay out of the brine, and you need a little bit of a head space for your fermentation lock to breathe. So we're going to work to do this in a way that will give us the space we need. And normally, you can cut the pickles a little bit to make them fit and so forth, and I can do some of that right now. But when you have more time, you can set this up in a way that will, be a little more feng shui in there, and then you'll have room. You really just want a little bit of room for your fermentation lock, but I'll plop it in now. Typically, I'd arrange those vegetables a little bit better, so it came up right about to here. Just room for this weight on top to hold them down. Then we'll check our brine. All right, looks like it's fully dissolved. We're going to pour that over our mix of cucumbers. And we're going to come up just to the bottom of the neck, a little bit higher. We want about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of headspace. That was just the right amount. You might want to make a little more than a liter just in case. But see, I typically would have arranged this a little better with more cucumbers so that I wouldn't need quite as much brine. Then there are also these silicone seals. But, there's one in there already. They're not that critical. Sometimes I'll do it without them, just turn it down tight. But that gives you an extra seal there. You do want to do whatever you can to keep the oxygen out of your ferment, right? So that's all there is to it. So these will, you can leave these at room temperature for 2 or 3 days. And sometimes if you're in a hurry to get your first batch of pickles, you can do this whole fermentation at room temperature, as long as the temperature in the room doesn't go around above like 73 or 74, because then the pickles can spoil. So you want to keep the air conditioning on. Maybe 70, 72 is a better temperature. If I'm not in a rush for the pickles, I'll leave these out at room temperature for a couple of days until the fermentation gets going. All these lactic acid bacteria fermenting the carbohydrates in the cucumbers into lactic acid, right? And that's why they call lacto fermented pickles. And lactic acid is also really gut healthy in your small intestine. So I will leave these up for a couple of days and then move them into the cellar and let them ferment a little more slowly for about 3 or 4 weeks. But if you're in a rush, just leave them for a full week on the counter at room temperature. And then you just swap out this cover for, what did I do with it? For one of these covers without the fermentation lock on it, and just throw them in the refrigerator and you're good for 3 or 4 months. Good luck.